So 2 restoration projects, and the west channel is a riparian channel. It is restoration that includes oak woodland and sycamore woodland, and it goes all the way back to nearly the beginning of the landfill's construction. The permits, it's already signed off. It got signed off in, what year was that? 2008. But it suffered through 2 fires already. The 2007 Santiago fire, the 2020 Silverado fire. And you'll be amazed at how it's recovered already. Even though, I think, 2021 was a really dry year. We didn't have a lot of vegetation reseed. Not a lot of resprouting, but you can see all the sycamores have come back. And then the other project is the wetland basin, which is on the landfill, and we're going to lose our vantage point. On the northern part of the landfill, there was a landslide. In fact, that's the reason why the landfill is here in the first place. All the hills surrounding the landfill are landslide prone, and it was once owned by the Irvine company. The Irvine company is they're a home developer. They couldn't build homes here on unstable ground, so they sold it to the county, and the county placed a landfill here. But we still have to deal with the landslide issues, and in order to remediate a landslide, we had to impact a what was it called? It was called I can't remember the actual term. It was a wetland. And we took out 1.1 acres, and we put back 2.7 acres of wetland habitat. So you can tell by the storms over the weekend, all of our concrete basins are full. The landfill is a giant construction site, and so we have several concrete basins to collect storm water. The storm water picks up a lot of sediment, and we contain all that storm water and let it settle out. And then we skim off the surface of the water, which is the cleanest, and release that after a few days. And of course, before releasing, we have to test the water for any contaminants like heavy metals and iron. We test the oxygen content to see if there's any bacteria. So it is full, which means I think it's actually overflowing. So, which is understandable. It was, I think we got over an inch this weekend.
Oh yeah, we had some those black buckets that had this much water in it.
There you go.
And it's like empty, and I'm like, okay. This is a steep road.
Very steep, but fully paved, so we're able to get back there just fine. Now, this basin that we're going to see is a series of basins. So water from the north and the eastern part of the landfill flows down this concrete channel, and then it's collected in a concrete basin, and the water is allowed to settle out, and the cleanest water is then sent over into the wetland basin. And the wetland basin is lined in plastic so that it's a created wetland. It didn't exist prior to, when did we put it in? I think it went in 2013. I think it was completed in 2013. And so it was fully created. This was just the upland banks of Bee Canyon Wash. So everything to our right in this lower area is Bee Canyon Wash. And we can help out here.
Okay.
And we'll go for a walk.
Cool. didn't bring my life vest.
Hopefully we're not going swimming. Where is that?
Okay.
Hopefully we're not swimming. You don't need to wear your hard hats unless you really want to. We're nowhere near so you can see all this water from the northern part of the site and the eastern part of the site has to get contained first. We contain it and let all that chocolate water, looks like chocolate milk, right? We let that settle. And then the water, the surface water is going to be the cleanest. That is sent over into the wetland basin. So we're going to go look at that first.
How often do water test for lead or heavy metals?
With every release.
Oh, how often do you find that it has it?
Not lead or not any of the heavy metals. The only issue with this site is iron.
Oh, okay.
But that's because the soil is naturally iron rich.
Yeah, I think so. Is that or
So far the water board is satisfied.
okay, cool.
To a certain degree. But yeah, all the other issues, I forget exactly what they test for. I'm sure I'm not in the water.
This is not a quiz.
And when you say release, does it go into like a channel or does it go into like the storm drains? What's the release?
This was originally Bee Canyon before it was called Landfill. So Bee Canyon conducts all, it's like the headwaters to San Diego Creek, which flows out to Newport Back Bay. So this is the headwaters. This drainage right here, this channel, goes out and drains out through, goes out to Portola, and eventually it meets up with San Diego Creek, if you're familiar with San Diego Creek, and that will make its way out to Newport Back Bay. So water from this wetland basin will get released into the channel after it's sampled, and same with that other basin that you just saw. So this was fully created. They carved out the basin and then lined it with plastic tubes, and then I think they put about 4 feet of soil on top. When it was created, it was just a barren brown basin. And so, and it was flat, and I asked for some topography. So there were 6 mounds of dirt, about 4 or 5 feet high, that were created, and so the soil from the mounds that were created had low spots, and then there were high spots. So once water started pooling in the basin, the willows grew on the higher elevation mounds, and then cattails grew on the lower elevations. But you don't see any cattails. Right now, all you see is willows, because and some, I think some sedges, but I haven't ID'd the sedge species yet. And I have a feeling it might be I have a feeling it might not be native. But so the reason why, I would say the very first 3 years, the basin had about a foot to 2 feet of standing water, and that's when we got mostly cattails. And then our engineers wanted this basin to hold more water. That way they wouldn't have to release as much water and sample as frequently. And unfortunately, that changed the diversity in the basin. So instead of 2 feet of standing water, we went up to like 4 feet of standing water. And that was too deep for the cattails. And so the basin converted mostly into willow. It's like a willow forest, but the cattails are gone. And there's a lot of open space in between the cattails, you can see. I want that to fill back up with cattails. Did I say that right? No, there's a lot of space in between the willows. I want the cattails to come back. That will get me more native coverage. So I've asked the engineers to keep the water level low, no more than 2 or 3 feet. because I mean, if you were to picture a pond, the edges of the pond would have your cattails, right? That's where the water's shallow. So,
Is there much problem with mosquitoes?
I am in contact with vector control. They bring out their mosquito fish and release them.
Oh, okay.
So no problems that I can tell. There's quite a bit of wildlife in here. They seem to be keeping the mosquitoes under control. And it does dry out around. It dries out a lot later than say a natural pond. It dries out around August, and then August through the first rain. So like it can be dry all the way up to December.
Okay.
Are you ever going to have to replace the plastic sheeting underneath?
In the future, perhaps, but because there's sediment that does a small amount of sediment that does layer in there, it could possibly be self-sealing in essence. But I mean, if it does leak some, it's not the end of the world. It would just drain out to Buchanan Wash, so it would still be a natural function. And the engineers love this basin because it's a clear contrast between the other concrete basin that releases straight into Buchanan Wash. They test the water that releases directly from that concrete basin, whereas they don't test directly from this concrete basin.
No, how do you wait?
It flows into here.
Yeah.
And the water that's released from this basin is significantly cleaner. So it is the what is it called? The vegetation's uptaking a lot of the
Rubbers.
Yes, scrubbing. Basically, yeah. Can you all see some of the irrigation lines in there? So when it was first established, and I planted, we did a lot of mule fat plant cuttings, we did a lot of willow cuttings and some container plants. So we installed an irrigation system, and it was, well, you can see there are no irrigation lines that come all the way down here from the office. So there is, here, I'll walk you back this way. A remote hookup, so a water truck would back in, hook up to the irrigation system, and then pump enough pressure, since it's mostly drip, enough pressure to feed all of the container plants. And it's been established, we just haven't pulled out all the irrigation lines. It's something I do plan to do once this dries out again. Actually, they were supposed to do it this summer, but didn't get to it, and they were supposed to get all the tamarisk out in there. I don't know if you've noticed, I've got some tamarisk in there, and it's flagged with like red flagging. You'll see it when we walk this way, and they haven't gotten to it yet. I'm hoping we don't release too much water from this basin, and my landscapers can still get in there and weed. Any questions on what you're seeing so far?
Do they take a little boat out there ever? Or?
No, not out there, only because there's so much vegetation, you can't get very far.
But how are they going to do landscaping?
They do it when it's dry.
Yeah.
And we have had some, not flycatchers, but Leesbell's vireo has been spotted here. Hopefully flycatchers in the future. We'll see.
Has any geese been out here? Or?
Not geese, but we definitely have ducks. I think I saw some coots the other day, or last year. This is really the most substantial water we've had in a while. And lots of frogs. Tree frogs and I think, what's the other species? The spadefoot toad.
Okay.
They've found spadefoot toad in here. So if you're okay with getting muddy, we can walk along the berm, the dam wall of the wetland basin.
Okay.
We'll go this way. Just do not slip. on this hose here, just stuck over there.
Mm-hmm.
There's the tamarisk that they didn't get yet. There's quite a bit in there.
Is that the one with the red tag on it?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So, this wetland has definitely been a work in progress, an experiment really. When they first built the basin, it didn't have a spillway. So the only way for water to be released from this basin were through valves built into this dam, this berm. So you just turn the valves open and water would drain that way. And it was fine for several years. I would have water go down the pipes. Those pipes are perforated. The perforations would allow water to spread throughout this, we call it an enhancement area, because it, prior to, well, this whole basin berm had to be renovated. But prior to the renovation, this had native habitat. It just needed some extra help. So the water from the basin would water everything on the banks. However, so I mentioned it was an experiment, right? Mm-hmm. Because the only way for water to be released from the basin were through these valves, and there are 9 of them. 2029, January 2029, we had a huge storm. Did I say 29? 2019.
Okay, yeah, because that's the future.
Really, really, I think it was the end of January. Really, really bad storm. I mean, we were getting I think it was like an inch an hour, but it was a crazy storm. That concrete basin filled up. This basin filled up. And the valves were wide open. We just could not drain water fast enough out of this basin. And it wasn't obvious at the time, but water was flowing underneath the dirt, under where we were standing, but eroding under the berm wall. Mm-hmm. And so come, I think it was like February 1st or something when we got in, there was a big hole in the berm, and water had just completely drained out of the wetland basin. It went from like 8 feet in depth down to what you're seeing right now. Like just, a few puddles, and we were shocked. So the repair involved putting in a spillway. So we'll go look at the spillway.
It's funny, the more I walk on the mud, the taller I get. So underneath this berm here, is there like a bunch of rocks and then they put the dirt on top of it?
Correct. Well, there's dirt and then there's a layer of rock. I actually don't know the complete cross section.
I dug deep in my yard and found the layer of rocks when they put in the hillside. So I expect that in a lot of areas. And then this is why some people may not see it, because it's actually pushed through the rocks and it's cleared a path, but the rocks are still there, so it's supporting the top.
Yes. The water flows, takes the easiest path, and so if there are holes in between gravel, it's going to go through the gravel, and that's what water did. So we won't have that problem anymore, because in 2021 we did this repair, put in this huge concrete structure, but it also set back our whole project several years. This whole berm had to be reseeded, and it's just starting to sprout. Wait, did I say 2021?
2019.
2021 is our review.
The fire was 2020, October 2020. I think the repair got done before 2020, or at least before the fire. I think the repair got done early 2020. Then we had the fire. And then I had to reseed everything after that. So it's been several hiccups. But the meal fat's doing really well. anytime there's water, something's going to grow.
Yeah.
So, and you can kind of hear, some water in Bee Canyon Wash, so there's water flowing. So Bee Canyon Wash is also a mitigation project. So you see every one of those sycamores out there? They're bright, they've got the bright orange leaves. They all burned. You can see the tops of them are dead, but at the base, you can see brand new leaves. They've all crown sprouted. So I'm very thrilled to see that. So this is a different project. It originated from the very beginning of the landfill, well before my time. So when they put in, when they put in the first few phases of the landfill, it did affect this drainage. When they also put in the the west basin, that first basin that you saw, of course there was a drainage impact. So our job was to restore some of the vegetation in here, plant sycamore trees and oak trees, and it's no longer we don't have a performance standard to meet anymore, because it is signed off. The regulators, and they were Army Corps of Engineers, Regional Water Control Board, and who was our third? Of course, California Fish and Wildlife, and I don't think U.S. Fish and Wildlife was involved. So our three regulators, and so I just keep it maintained in the sense of the status that it was signed off as. But that it seems like a new weed pops up every year. This year on the farm, I saw stinknet. Do you guys know stinknet?
No.
It's a new weed that California Invasive Pest Council is starting to flag, and it's just this tiny little, it's probably 2 inches tall at most, and it has a little yellow button of a flower, a little round button of a flower, and it will spread like crazy. So I saw that in here earlier this year.
So do you have to take it out or spray it or whatever?
We spray.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's see, what else can I tell you? Well, we can go back this way. And any questions here about what we just saw?
Well, I had a question on that far wall near the road. Is the crack make any difference here, or?
That is actually off-site. That's part of Public Works. And yes, the cracks, the rivulets are a problem. It's something Public Works will probably need to come in and fill, but they pop up every year.
Oh, okay.
That brings up another fun fact. So the landfill has its desilting basins, or the concrete basins. It has the wetland basin, and then all of this flows into a retention basin, or it's also called a retarding basin. At the foothills of a lot of places in Southern California, you'll have retarding basins. Orange County has about, I think we have like 8 of them maybe. There's this one, there's one in nearly every canyon. There's one in Round Canyon, there's one in Agua Chinon, which is the next canyon over. There's one up in Hicks, which is the next canyon to the north. And I believe there's one more to the north. So several retarding basins. They're just there to slow storm water down, and that way we don't have flooding in our residential areas. So you can even look on a map, they're just big basins. So that's what that is downstream of us. So there are like several layers of environmental protection for our creeks and streams.
So when you were talking about the up above, when they test the water, and if they tested it with lead or something, then would they siphon the water out and then have it processed through like Irvine Ranch Water District's processing plant for?
No, the water would sit for longer.
Oh, okay.
And it is most likely the contaminants came from the soil, and so if it settles, they'll test the surface water again after a few weeks and see if it's dropped out.
Okay.
And that sediment dries up come the summer, and we collect that and put it back in the landfill and use it for what we call daily cover or landfill cover. We'll walk this way.
Okay.
We'll head back the way we came, and We'll go look at some of the new,
Does the crack make any difference?
only if it goes deep. I think it's just a surface crack. I'll keep an eye on it though.
And I noticed there wasn't too many succulents around here.
Not in a riparian area.
Okay.
You won't get too many succulents in what might be considered a wet habitat.
Yeah. And the ground's not as squishy as I thought it would be from the rain.
It's well, when it's dry, sometimes the first rain it just runs off.
Yeah.
You don't get that absorption.
And that's what we need.
Mm-hmm. That's why you get all the flash floods in the desert. It gets so dry, the soil's I think there's a term for it where it just rejects water.
Hydrophobic?
Hydrophobic, yes, there we go. Like they've done tests and studies not to let a garden or landscaping dry out too much, because then it becomes hydrophobic. And now we are all 2 inches taller.
And these work boots always absorb it, in the crack.
Yes. Well, that's how we get all our traction, right?
Yeah.
So, you can walk down a little way when you go down here, but you can see from up above. I planted new trees this year. We planted 150 new sycamore trees because they all, a good number burned in the fire. So, this whole area burns every 10 years. The landfill itself didn't burn because it's got no vegetation to burn. Oh, okay. And since there's like the traps are covered up, the traps was covered up, there wasn't a lot of material burned, but what could burn were the landfill gas lines. Wow, yeah. That would be really important. Which were, they're HDPE. So they melted and then poof, all that was left was like soot. And you can see the linear piles of soot all throughout the landfill. So that was a problem because we weren't able to collect our landfill gas out of the plant very effectively.
How deep is this basin here, or whatever? This thing, the pool.
What about it?
How deep is the pool?
Oh, I can't remember. It's probably like 12 feet. Because the standpipe itself, I think, is so that thing that's barely sticking out of the water with the yellow cage. That thing's like 15 feet tall.
Oh, okay.
It's pretty deep in there.
With this, it reminds me of that commercial they used to have with the Indian crying.
Oh, yes. Actually, this is pretty good. I mean, after a Santa Ana wind, it's awful.
Oh, yeah.
And, I'm just trying. They lowered one of the skimmers so that those are really interesting contraptions. It's called a skimmer. It only takes the water off the surface and then sends it down the standpipe. So, and the surface water is the cleanest. So,
except for here.
They're just going to take that water and bring it down maybe 2 feet, and the rest is going to sit for a while. So, maybe we'll just look from over here. You don't need to get too much muddier.
That's pretty hard to do that.
You sink in a few inches right there. So, and I'm going to be restoring the road. So you can also see all the irrigation lines go to these new trees that are with blue tags, so I know which ones are which. These all got planted in February of this year. So they, then they were 1 gallon container plants, so they've grown quite a bit. What else can I tell you? This particular oak tree has burned several times since I've been here. You can see all the dark char marks on the branches. And now I got to get someone in there to collect all the debris
Plastic.
out of the tree. Santa Ana wind days are really bad here. We get plastic bags in the trees every year. Let's see, what else can I tell you?
What kind of birds are those up there?
Probably turkey vultures. Yeah, they're not flapping their wings very much. Yeah, turkey vultures. We get lots of those on the landfill. And did you guys know we have a falconer?
That's like half the reason we're here.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can't take you up to see the falconer today.
Devastating.
I know. You
Okay,
guys
we're already planning to come again.
yeah, you got to come back. I'll do a separate tour for an actual landfill tour. Now this was just to see my habitat projects. And so let's go look at this one over here. So this is just a little patch of coastal sage scrub that was amazing before the fire, and it has not recovered as well.
Did you want to leave your hat? I'm going to leave my hat. I ordered us
I don't have to walk all the way over there. I think you can see it from over here. So that knob, if you go, we drove past it. This knob of this hill straight up the end of the road there. You can see all the cacti on the hill. That is a coastal sage scrub component of the same project, the riparian project. It burned, and it burned pretty severely in 2020. So you can see it hasn't recovered as well. It doesn't, because it doesn't have as much water. It's not receiving water from any of my other projects. It's not being irrigated. It is relying on rainwater, and 2021 was very dry. So I've already seeded it, and we'll see what comes up again. So all I need to do is just weed and seed. It's an avocado grove. Irvine Ranch still has some agriculture that they maintain.
Really? And it's irrigated from any of this water?
No, they have their own irrigation system.
Yeah, the avocados can be sensitive to chemicals and stuff.
rare fruit.
Right.
In fact, you can see it from the office, and I had a tour the other day, and I asked, what are those headstones doing out there?
At first glance, I was like, no way. Yeah, it's very like veteran.
It would be a great place for a cemetery, but no, they're avocado trees.
It's for the headstones of the people who didn't show up to the tour. Who I spoke to last night.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I'm like,
So this landfill is 725 acres in size, so it's pretty big. And
How much of that is in use at any one time?
right now the trash footprint is 540 acres or
Okay,
so.
so
They just started expanding into the next phase of construction to expand the lined part of the landfill. We're now going into phase 8A. So I think it's going to bump up to like maybe 600 acres
okay, wow.
of like impact. And because the impact is so great, we were one of the original what would you call it, members of the Nature Conservation Plan. Orange County has an HCP, Habitat Conservation Plan, which is called the Natural Communities Conservation Plan. And it was something that the county, Orange County, coordinated with U.S. Fish and Wildlife and California Fish and Wildlife. And several other entities are involved, like Caltrans and
Is the
several
Coastal
other.
Commission ever involved?
Not.
Or it's just
no.
far enough away that they don't care?
It's inland
Nice.
from there. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
I don't wish that upon you.
I know. I've had projects.
It's a
with
stone's
Coastal
throw from the
Commission.
ocean, and the Coastal Commission is always in my life.
Oh, yeah, it makes things really difficult.
Yeah, so challenging. I'm glad that you don't. I mean, I was just
Yeah,
curious.
I would think that they would have to, since like I mean all water.
Just the runways, yeah.
Isn't Coastal Commission a certain number of like thousands of feet away
It
from the
is,
shore?
but I feel like they care about so many things that they
Yeah.
don't need to care about that they would just for the
Yeah,
fun
like
of it.
the water
I don't
goes
know.
to the ocean.
Yeah,
at
the
some
water
point.
goes to the ocean and
Right.
they care. Yeah.
And it's so vague that they just claim jurisdiction on
Yes.
some
Oh,
things.
yes. Boy, do they.
But
Boy,
so
do
far
they.
we have not had to deal with them.
Yeah. Oh, good.
But yeah, so all the collaborators.
Take that part out of your.
Yeah, lots of other collaborators in the NCCP, and so because the purpose of the NCCP was, okay, we're going to develop these areas of Orange County, we're going to preserve these areas,
Sure.
and the original contributors were, big developers like Orange County and all of the various agencies, so like Public Works and my department, OC Waste and Recycling, and like transportation, big developers. And so we had an idea of how much impact we would do in the county throughout, I don't know how far they went, like for the next 80 years.
Okay.
And so we threw out numbers. Okay, this landfill will be 725 acres in size. That's going to be our impact. We'll preserve this part of Orange County to compensate for that. So because we're a contributor, for the most part, the coastal sage scrub is accounted for, but we were given an allotment of what we could impact. So it's all accounted for through closure of the landfill, probably sometime in 2075. Yeah. Yeah, but new things pop up all the time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Of course.
So that's
Well,
why.
you were just saying with like all the erosion and the fires and the so many unknowns. Yeah.
Well, how deep is the landfill at its deepest? Or
I think in some areas, like the highest part of the landfill right now, I think trash is about 200 feet below. But I don't know the exact elevation of where the liner sits. I'll
Okay.
have to look that up. I need that fact because more than one
yeah,
person has asked.
yeah,
me.
because then I'd like to also know is how high do they plan to have it eventually at the
Yes.
highest, wherever, is this whole area going to be just a flat thing at one point?
It will be more like a pyramid.
Okay.
So the way they build it is they carve out a big basin, right? Big hole, they line it, and then once the hole's filled up with trash, and they level it off, then they start building a pyramid.
Okay.
Because that's the most stable way to pile trash
Yeah.
up. So it'll be more like a pyramid going up.
And then once that's finished and they have stuff on there, what's going to go on top? Just native stuff, I guess.
Yes.
And then they can't use the landfill until Gozer leaves the property. Gozer from Ghostbusters.
A landfill will be maintained at minimum 40 years after closure.
Okay.
And that's because the very last trash truck that comes in brings in something that will break down and produce landfill gas and produce liquid trash or leachate for upwards of 40 years. And it's not like, bam, the landfill's closed and we walk away. So that trash comes in and it starts producing landfill gas like a bell curve, and it starts tapering off. So after 40 years, we're collecting landfill gas, we're managing that, we're managing the leachate, and it will taper off eventually.
Okay.
And then it'll be a less maintained landfill, but probably still maintained in some way. Like Orange County has something like more than 20 closed landfills, and some of them are maintained more than others.
Well, yeah, I know there was I think it was toward Disneyland area over there in Anaheim. There was a landfill that I know a person who put a small golf putting course or whatever on top of that.
Oh.
And I don't know how many years it was. And the parking lot would always get wavy.
Yes.
And they'd have to repave it. And they'd have the poles sinking.
Yes.
And
Just from it settling, essentially?
yeah.
Oh, wow.
Well, today's trash, so the trash that's coming in today is going to settle 3 feet by next year.
Wow.
And it'll settle more, like a foot every year after that. So you can't build a structure on top of a
Sure,
closed fence.
sure.
It'll just
We got
sink.
this space, right?
So this will be covered. We'll have a final cover of soil. If I'm still around, I plant the vegetation on top, mostly native vegetation. But they also want some kind of like a screen so that Irvine can't see a lot of the slope. So there'll be some other trees, maybe pine trees or something. And then it'll get incorporated into open space areas.
Okay, like parklands or?
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
Then you guys get to work.
No, thank God. No, regional. Regional would take that on, yeah.
What's the,
Well,
like,
maybe, I
that
don't
guy's
know, actually.
Oh, the water truck. So he's probably washing off the mud on the roads. On dry days, we always have a water truck driving around to water down the roads to make sure it's not dusty. And he washes down the roads on a wet day so they're not muddy. But I don't know why he's washing the fence. Probably because mud's getting splashed up on the fence. And what else can I tell you while we're out here? It's a 725 acre site. It's pretty big. Not all of my habitat projects can fit on the landfill. A lot of it got squeezed in here because we're not putting any trash on this end of the site. But I mentioned the landslide, right? The landslide created a mitigation project that was greater than what we could fit here.
Oh.
So this wetland basin is only half of the whole project. The other half is in 2 canyons over, off-site on OC Park's property.
Oh, okay.
So, and it was a very unusual project. Most habitat restoration projects are, okay, you took out 1 acre of land, put back 2 acres. And just, here's this square 2 acre habitat project, that's it. You're only responsible for 2 acres, meet your performance standard, and good. This one was different. We are in coordination with Irvine Ranch Conservancy, and they were just starting out doing habitat projects. They manage a lot of OC Parks lands, and they came up with this idea of let's foster the whole watershed. So Agua Shannon is a canyon. We're just responsible for, it was only like 20 acres of riparian that they suggested let's do intense habitat restoration on 10 acres on the whole watershed, which is it's more than 100 acres.
Oh, wow.
We'll do it at not, a standard performance standard would be, okay, less than 10% weeds, less than 10% non-native. For riparian habitat restoration, it'd be like 90% cover. Which is what we do in a small area. And the rest of the watershed, they proposed, well, we're not going to reseed and restore the entire watershed, but we'll focus on some invasive species, and we'll eliminate the invasive species in the watershed, and we'll foster some species and help spread seed and foster some of that. So it's more about enhancement in the rest of the watershed. And it's really working out.
So interesting.
So I was curious about the other place. Do you have to go down B Canyon, exit here to get to the other place, or can you go through anywhere to get there from here?
Technically, you could go out this way, but the best way is to, it's on the other side of the toll road. If you take Portola Parkway, all the way to the end, you cross over the toll road. It's back in there.
Oh, okay.
It's on Park's property, so it's tucked away.
Yeah.
But if you ever get a chance to go on one of the Irvine Ranch Conservancy hikes, Agua Shannon is a guided tour, and you can hike in, and it's only like 3 miles in, and you get to what's called the Grand Canyon of Orange County.
Okay.
And it really does look like the Grand Canyon. You've got the sediment layers, and it's an amazing view. So I recommend that.
That's cool.
Well, if you're not too cold, we'll get back in the van, and I can show you one other project. What's your time commitment here?
I don't have any time commitment. What about you guys?
I
about
just
you?
don't wanna-
For me, I had to be here at 12 o'clock.
Okay.
We'll probably finish up by 11:30.
Okay. Or we can drop them off at the edge of the road. No, no.
Just making my way back. Let's get back in the van and warm up.
Here, let me- Oop. Okay.
Completely did not get it.
Oh, don't worry. It's a field vehicle.
I kicked as much as I could.
Thank you. My boots together.
3 times and you'll be in the landfill.
There's no place like the Barbie.
No place like the landfill.
No place like that. I'm just surprised there's no geese in this, just because it's water sitting, sort of.
Well, this popped up over the weekend.
So it's normally dry, so they don't know about it.
It's dry for half the year.
Okay.
And if there's rain, like last year, we didn't have that much rain. The basin didn't fill up too much. No geese, but we'll get ducks.
We got the turkey vultures and the falcon.
We will see Al the falconer next time you come out.
Al, his name is Al.
Al Hodges.
Al Hodges. And does the falcon have a name? Or...
He doesn't have a falcon this year, but he did in past years, because he has two methods of, what he's doing is not falconry. What his purpose here is to have predatory birds on the landfill to scare seagulls. Falconry is where you hunt with a bird, and the bird fetches a rabbit and brings it back to you. But he's not hunting here. His job is to have a bird that scares off seagulls. And about more than 5 years, maybe 7 years ago, we had 5,000 seagulls flying over the landfill.
5,000?
Oh, it was awful. So bad. Guaranteed you got pooped on if you came out to the active area of the landfill. So the landfill staff would shoot up what were noisemakers, almost like fireworks, to scare the gulls, and the gulls would take off, and they'd be right back in 10-15 minutes. So we brought out the falconer, and it has been highly effective. So because the gulls can't get access to trash to eat, they have, shift down one more gear. Because the gulls cannot get to what would be like a supplemental food source, an unnatural food source. They can't produce the same number of chicks as they used to, and the gull population has decreased.
Oh. So these were like landfill gulls, like they stayed here to reproduce and have their chicks.
They were at the beach during the summer, and then like for instance on a weekend like what we had where the storm comes in, and the beach conditions weren't really nice, they would come inland and eat trash.
Oh.
And during the winter, they would push inland. And so our falconer here at FRB, he's only here during the winter, between the months of October through April.
October through April, so they were seasonal.
And then, and now at most we see 100 gulls in the winter.
And sad thing about seagulls is 95% of seagulls in the world have plastic in their stomach.
Oh, well, they're scavengers, so.
Well, they see it floating. Well, they'll see it floating on the ocean,
Mhm.
and they'll dive down and get it and swallow it, but then it can't leave their body.
Right, right.
So then they actually die of starvation with a full stomach of plastic.
Such a shame. So there's.
You can see that tree's burned.
So I don't know if you guys recognize brittle bush, Encilia farinosa. This is, see the grayish green leaves?
Mm-hmm.
That is a riverside species of Encilia. It does not belong here. It was planted here in a seed mix, an erosion control seed mix back in the early 90s. And brittle bush is so, it's just, once it takes hold, it wants to grow.
And is it bad to be here?
It is an inland empire species, so it would not naturally grow here on its own on the coast. There should be Encilia californica. So I've been trying to get it to go away, but it just wants to grow. But I guess it's better than weeds.
Mm-hmm.
What were the other invasive plants that you removed?
Well, you saw the tamarisk in the wetland basin. There's a lot of tree tobacco out here. Of course, the tumbleweeds that you see all dried up. For some reason, the tumbleweeds got out of control this year. So I'm gonna have to have my landscaper do more spot spraying next summer. Definitely